In today's episode,
I celebrated my 8th year of sobriety recently.
Amazing.
And when I look at the 4 R's and I look at reflect and I look at recognize, when I look backwards on this pattern that I had, the alcohol, the getting drunk, the dopamine that would come along with it, all those things, I think, was a form of self-medication. But here's what's really weird. I would have horrible hangovers, 2-day hangovers. And, depression would come in and things like that. But one thing that, and I don't know if it was just the chemical imbalance of being hungover, but it would definitely put me in an area where I just kind of didn't feel that imposter. All right, I am Johnny, and with me I have Kyle. Say hello, Kyle.
What's up, everybody? What's going on?
Well, today I have our definition of the day, and one of the things about this definition is it really calls out a very large word that we with imposter syndrome struggle with, and that word is fear. That's a real key word. And the definition of the day is the fear that others will eventually uncover your perceived weaknesses and question your competence in the same way that you do. I love that definition. I love the way that it hits on so many levels. It talks about fear, your perceived weaknesses, and just the way that it says question your competence in the same way that you do is a definition that really helps me understand imposter syndrome in a different vein, and with a couple of key words that really make a difference. So that's our definition of the day, folks. If you love what we're doing, follow us on social and everywhere you get your favorite podcasts.
Love that. Love that. We have a very special guest today, Johnny. It's almost like a Twilight Zone moment here because the guest is you.
I am the guest.
The founder, the straw that stirs the drink, Johnny. You are our guest today, and I get to interview you. Last time it was Jeff, and then before that it was me. You're both founder and you're under the microscope now. How does that feel?
I'm in the hot seat, baby. I'm in the hot seat, and I'm ready.
So many good questions to pull from, but I'm just going to go right off the top. I see one I love here.
Oh, hang on. You missed something.
Oh.
What's one of the taglines?
So let's jump in.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry. I got to get excited about that. Yeah. Question number 1. Can you share a personal experience where you felt imposter syndrome creeping in, and how did you handle it? I wanted to ask you this specifically because you're the guy,
Oh, man. I mean, you're asking me to pick one?
Yeah. Just one.
There's a leadership program that I'm a part of. It's through the Nashville Technology Council. It's called Emerging Leaders in Technology and Engineering, or ELITE. Shout out to all the past ELITE cohorts. For quite some time, despite being one of the co-founders of the group, I did not call myself a mentor. I really strayed away from the word leader, and I had helped co-found a leadership program that was built for mentoring, and yet I wouldn't use either one of those words, leader or mentor. And I think a lot of that was it was imposter syndrome in its most classic sense, and on, really out there in the open. I kind of remember one of the first times I stood up in front of the group, and I just allowed myself to be a leader. I just thought it in my head, and I said, you've earned it, you've done it, you've accomplished it. Really try to be in this moment, get past it, get through it. And, I still say, and I've always had a theory that, imposter syndrome is not something you can cure. It's a voice in the back of my head that will always be there. I have some things in a coaching program that I'm building where there's tools and methodologies to help you harness that piece of it, but I think that's what I did that day was I harnessed it, and, I still felt it in the back of my head. I could still hear that little bit of that twinge, that edge, that nervousness, but I stood there and became the leader that I think I'd already been for a while. I just wouldn't allow myself to do because of imposter syndrome.
Digging in more on that, I love that. Do you think that's an interesting it's really interesting you picked that one specifically because some words carry weight, like when I hear the word mentor, that's such a weighty word because I love philosophy, and so I go way back, I think about all the great, philosophical teachers, and I'm like, those were mentors. I'm just a guy. Do you think this is probably true, but do you think, and there's probably a lot of instances of this, but in that moment, it was like, not only did you have the imposter syndrome, but that calling of mentor is a big calling, and without imposter syndrome, that's a big deal. Do you think that weightiness also kind of came into play? It's like, God, that's a big word.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that talk about trigger. Leadership, mentor, the word entrepreneur, that's what I am now. But, all of those words are words that make that trigger, and they do carry that weight. And I like that word. They're heavy, they're cumbersome. And they kick in imposter syndrome like crazy. But one thing I found, and I'm gonna go back to that program. We had some real heavy hitters, C-level executives that came in to mentor the people, the students we were bringing up through this program. And as I got to see them in that element, mentoring these young minds, what I saw was they were learning themselves. They were scared. Sometimes you could see that they were unsure. You could see trepidation. I'm sure probably some of them were quietly suffering imposter syndrome. But I watched them, push forward, and I think by having this pretty large list of incredible leaders in this program, watching them just kind of be a person and sometimes seeing some of them struggle, it really helped me kind of persevere and push through. And so um, that would really be something I would add to that term leader, that term mentor. I've found that a lot of times mentorship, it's really a two-way street, and the student becomes the teacher, and you come out and say, I learned more than you did. So, but yeah, there's a weightiness to any of those words like leadership and mentor for sure.
I love that. Kind of reminds me of one of my favorite Socrates quotes: "The wisest man is the one who admits he knows nothing."
Mm, yeah.
I love like kind of that humbling, that entering the room, and that admission of like, I'm a learner, and I do have knowledge to share, but at the end of the day, I don't know everything, and I'm here to learn and be sharpened. So that's a huge thing.
I may just give you a question to ask me, and it's about failure.
Yeah, please.
I'm gonna start asking my own questions of myself because of what you said. I felt like it's a good opportunity that my relationship with failure. There's another heavy word. There's another charged word, and I think the way I was raised, while it probably wasn't direct, it was you really don't allow for failure, don't accept failure. You have to push through failure, and both in the workplace through a couple mentor programs and leadership programs that I got involved in, and people that I know, people that I had to work with, my partners in my business. I really I had to learn how to have a more mature relationship with failure, and I don't even know that in my mind I was programmed to just react to failure in such a negative way. But along the way of being a business owner and being an entrepreneur, I had to learn how to embrace failure, and that was a huge, huge learning experience. It did give me some ability to harness that imposter syndrome a little bit better, and sort of allow myself to fail and not have it be some massive triggering system. So I think, to tag on to what you were talking about, having a relationship with failure where you're allowed to fail is something that I think is just a part of maturing.
Yeah, that's huge because failure is a process, and it's also data collection too. But depending, and it sounds like you had this background, like if you grew up in a background where failure is literally just that, and it's not treated as some sort of sharpening process or a data collection process, then, that's a great fertile ground for imposter syndrome because you're going to question yourself, you're going to doubt yourself, you'll never necessarily have full belief in the things you put out there. So that's a really, really good take.
There's a tricky um, there's a tricky level of insecurity that rides shotgun with an inability to accept failure. It, coming from and just getting my background a little bit, my dad struggled with insecurity and suffered losses early on in his life, and so I think in a lot of ways, he was a very insecure guy. And what's funny is he was like GI Joe, Sergeant, Rambo. He was a mechanic. He could fix anything. He could build anything. And from just outside looking in, and this is a typical classic story, he looked like Sergeant Rock. But the family knew inside massive insecurity. And I think that insecurity manifested in a way that as I was being raised, failure just wasn't allowed for because you couldn't be comfortable with failure. That insecurity would kick in and it was such a I don't know, it was a thing to overcome that
Yeah.
I was very glad I did, and it's something that I'm happy I got on the other side of. So
Thank you for sharing. It's wonderful. Wonderful as in that's really wonderful insight. Sorry you went through it, but no, really good insight. So glad you
truth, man. All about
yeah, man. Yeah. I'm asking this question selfishly because I just need insights here just in general in my life because this is something I struggle with. How important is self-compassion or positive self-talk in overcoming imposter syndrome?
wow. I mean, that's that's a 2-day seminar. Um, I think it's very critical. There was a leader from my past. I was actually just texting him today. Um, and he introduced the idea for our team of a brag book. And one of the most humble human beings I've ever met. And I'm talking true humble, not fake humble. Uh, the guy walked the walk. Jeff, yeah, I'm talking about you, if you're listening. And it seemed like it almost seemed silly when he recommended it to the team, but it was something that I think he used as a way to give us a stronger foundation and really allowed us to maybe get away from some of the more arrogant. We were younger at the time, so we were arrogant, we were cocky, we hadn't overcome some of the things. It was very immature, just to be honest. And this leader, that introduction of a Brad book, he sort of policed it as it went along to make sure celebrate your successes, understand your wins and your losses, and do it in a way where you do it with humility. And I tell you that level of like celebration, that self care, that was probably one of the first and one of the best lessons I've learned about how important self-care is. And so come up with tricks, and it could just be as simple as a list. Um, I think it's critical. And I think that's a great question. And I think more people really should practice a level of self-care and celebration. You've done some things. It's especially for those of us who suffer from imposter syndrome.
Yeah, especially if it's rooted in what you just shared about failure, because I think the result of that is punitive, right? It's like being self-punitive and self-punishing. Self-punishing doesn't really allow you to recognize wins, right? It doesn't. It's something that kind of like suffocates your ability to be honest about both the good and the bad. And so that's a really interesting perspective.
And what a horrible cycle, that we those of us who do struggle with it find ourselves in, where it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I'm not the type of person that likes to like dip into my therapy and be like, like it's funny, like 40 years ago, you probably couldn't get a person to admit they go to therapy. And now people like post like full transcripts of the therapy on social media. But I will say, and it's relevant to this conversation, because one of the things that I've uncovered about myself in relation to this topic is that my therapist pointed out that I don't allow myself to celebrate. I don't allow myself in anything. That I'm very self-punitive, that I almost had an inability to admit that maybe I did something well, or that I'm, that I've worked hard and that I provide for my family, like these little things, right? Like you put food on the table, you pay the bills, like they're small things, but they're all things that I would never, ever give myself credit for, right? Or these are all things that I have a hard time admitting that I had something to do with that, my work ethic, the bravery of, and that's a word I would never use to describe myself, but the bravery of growing up the way I did and getting to where I am today, and the guts that took, right? And this is the first time really even saying that out loud. And so, I think a lot of people that have maybe some sort of trauma in their background, or something similar to what you talked about with the failure thing, it's like, what a miserable life. Like, and it took me till I'm 38 years old to realize that, wow, like you have never embraced or celebrated or given yourself credit for the things you've accomplished. You've just punished yourself for all the things you think you've done wrong, and that's a heck of a way to live.
Yeah, bravery. It's another kind of one of those almost irony triggering statements, but I think it's true. I think it is a level of overcoming. It's a certain type of valor, kind of pushing through and saying, yes, I have accomplished, and I am going to enjoy that, and I'm going to celebrate that thing. I think bravery was a great word for that. And it's funny, back in the definition when we started off, the word competency, and that's a complicated word, especially for folks that struggle with imposter syndrome, because we don't know what that word means. That word is, I look at it almost like normal people probably have foundational layers, where competency becomes something that they do the thing, they get the skills, they study. That competency, I'm assuming, grows in their mind. And, for me, it's like every time I stack something up, it falls apart. Stack something up, it falls apart. As far as just in that ability to feel competent.
Yeah, absolutely. That leads into this next question really well. How do you celebrate your successes but avoid attributing them to luck or external factors? Is there a process for that? Because that's something that seems impossible to me.
Yeah. Wow. To talk about, let's get the couch out and get all Freud on it for a minute. I think I sold my business back in October of 2023. I had two partners. We were partners for 21 years. Man, we had a dynamic. It was very complicated. We loved each other. 21 years of togetherness. There was some things, honestly, it didn't quite end perfectly. Some kind of textbook things about, business owners and going through a sale. But they were very strong people, both of them. And I often sort of hid behind them, if I'm being honest. And it was a real complicated relationship, but I hid behind them. And there was a point in time after we bought the company when I started doing things that was really where I was sort of expressing my strength and my talents inside of the business. And it was reflected in the growth of the company. US dollars started showing up in the door because of something that largely was something I led. And I don't know how I made that switch, but I almost didn't credit myself for that change in our company. And our business model evolved. There's a whole story behind it, but that that ability for me to come out of the shadows of my two partners that I'd sort of, hid behind for so long. I think that was a difficult journey for me to do. And a lot of it was just doing what we talked about earlier. And that was listing out the things that, oh, okay, I did this, I did this, I did this. And experiencing it in a way where it wasn't that insecure arrogance, where it truly felt just something that I'd accomplished and I felt good about it and I felt competent. And again, that word competent, back to the earlier definition, that's a complicated word for those of us that um, that have IS. So
Yeah. No, absolutely. Let's see here. I had one picked out here. This is a big one. What are there any mental exercises, habits, routines that help you manage feelings of inadequacy?
oh yeah. So I don't know that we've talked about it. I'm writing a book on imposter syndrome, and there's a coaching program that comes behind that I think I've referenced before. The name of the book is The Damage Advantage. The ideal concept is um, that while we may never be able to overcome it, and I do think that there's at least for me, and I think a large group of people, a lot of people that'll be listening, never something that you truly overcome. It'll always be a voice in the back of your head. There's all this energy that gets used in that doubt cycle that occurs. And if you can harness that energy and kind of push it in a certain direction, my theory is it can be a force for good. And I go through a lot of things and I tell a lot of stories in the book, in the beginning of the book, but then I get to what's essentially a platform, a framework that are some of the ways that I can self-correct when I know I'm doing it. And I like alliteration, and so it's the 4 R's. So the damage advantage, the 4 R's. The first one is research, and I think it's one of the tools that I've found that has kind of opened my eyes the most. And that's just going out and getting lost on the internet, finding YouTube videos, finding TED Talks, and there's a bunch. Going and reading the original article that where the term was coined from Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes. Learning and seeing and doing your research, that's the beginning. That's where you start understanding some things, and you start seeing where they play out in yourself. And once you start that, it never stops. So continual research is a tool that's the first R. The second is reflect. And in reflect, it's really looking backwards and trying to analyze yourself in a past experience. When did I do the thing that imposter syndrome made me do, or when was it at its worst? And so going back and reflecting, I can take what I learned through my research, reflect on, and then maybe understand myself a little bit better. And really that's because that reflect, what I'm really trying to accomplish is recognize. And there's recognition that goes backwards, where I look at my history and I see that's where you were doing, the thing that imposter syndrome made you do, where you weren't being your full self, and you recognize it. But the hardest one, the one that's really, I think I may have used the term muscle, but it's a muscle that you really got to build up. And that's recognizing it in the moment and attempting to see it happening in real time. And that's not easy, or at least it's not for me. As I'm stuck in it, I don't know that I'm there. It sort of eliminates the ability to self-analyze, to kind of hear myself talking. And so that recognition in the moment is really, really difficult. And it's something I've been working on for quite some time, probably about 5 to 6 years. And that in the moment recognition is something that is an incredible tool. And then remediate. And remediate is, it might be something that if you can recognize in the moment, you can course correct, you can pull yourself out of it. And it might just be, hang on, I got to go take a call. I got to call my wife. I left the stove on, whatever it is. You can remove yourself and then attempt to look at use that reflect and attempt to look at what was I doing there that triggered me, what was said, who was the person, what was that dynamic there. But you kind of got to remove yourself from the moment, and that remediation is a way. So again, the 4 R's are kind of the key to damage advantage, and it's research, it's reflect, it's recognize, and it's remediate.
When that book comes out, it's gonna be huge, man.
Working on it. Got a little while.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Gonna get
Yeah,
that workload, get those 4 R's in.
get the 4 R's in.
All right, love it. If I love this question because you asked me this, and this was like backpedaling for me because I went through a lot of emotions on this one. If imposter syndrome had a voice or a persona, what would it sound like, and how do you talk back to it?
Man, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that question.
I knew it. That's why I asked. I smelled it like fear, like a dog.
You know, so I'll reference yours. I think you were very specific. I'm pretty sure you said you heard your dad's voice, you heard your own voice. I won't say that I don't experience, members from my family, maybe, but normally it's more of just um, it's more of a dark sound. It's kind of quiet in a weird sort of way. It's omnipresent, and there are times when it's a shout. But the sound is the sound of kind of depression a little, and it is a little bit of an omnipresent sound, and I can't get as specific as you did, but I would say there are times where it's quiet, and sometimes the quiet times are the worst, because when it's real loud, I can hear it, I can see it shouting at me, and I go, "Oh, hang on." When it's quiet, that's when it's insidious, and it kind of takes over, and that's where the 4 R's could come into play, because that recognition and that remediation. Um, you have to listen for the quiet voice, and sometimes a whisper is really hard to see for what it is. When a shout, screaming, raving lunatic's easy to see coming at you and go, "Whoa, hang on." But sometimes it's a whisper, and that's when it's the most insidious.
Yeah, man, that like makes me think of like 10 other questions. I won't ask all 10. First of all, that when you said the depression part, it reminds me of one of my favorite bits by Patton Oswalt. He has a bit about the weird things that his depression makes him do. Like he'll go to the store in his sweatpants and he doesn't have anything on his list to shop for, but he'll walk around with a basket and he talks about himself like he's a tyrant, or he's like, "Do more for me, soft pretzels," Uh, it totally reminded me of that bit. You need to listen to that one. But I guess the question that generated in me was, are there certain situations, because you described it like volume, like there's quiet and then there's the loud and there's the depression. Are there situations that you've noticed or patterns that solicit that volume, like the different volumes? And also, is there a situation where there's not a snowball effect? Because the thing is, with me, it feels like what you just described, like it's really hard to keep it from snowballing because, like you said, it can move into depression, it can move into nihilism, self-doubt. Like it's just so quick to catch fire in all these other areas.
Nah, I mean, my first reaction to that question is the snowballing. It's easier to recognize. I can see it because of its extremity, but the rut that you can sometimes get in because of, this pathological level of self-doubt, it's a smolder, and it can really pull you down in a way that I think the snowball, at least, you're heading in a direction, you can get over the other side of it, you can put course correct, maybe your family members can see it. But I think I'll go back to that quiet part of it that can be a little more sinister, that can be a little more impactful, because it's just under the surface, and so you don't see it coming at you. You don't necessarily know you're in it when you're in it, and for me, that's the worst one.
Yeah. And it also is so much, there's so much like relationship between imposter syndrome and how it kind of also tag teams with these other things, with depression. Like I feel like they play really well together. Not in a good way, right? But it's like a chorus of self. I'm trying to think of a good way to say it, but like they like intermingle.
Um, I celebrated my 8th year of sobriety recently,
Amazing.
and when I look at the 4 R's and I look at reflect and, I look at recognize, when I look backwards on this pattern that I had, the, the alcohol, the getting drunk, the dopamine that would come along with it, all those things, I think, was a form of self-medication, but here's what's really weird. I would have horrible hangovers, 2-day hangovers, and, depression would come in and things like that. But one thing that, I don't know if it was just the chemical imbalance of being hungover, but it would definitely it sort of numbed it, it sort of killed it. And so some sort of weird thing happened there. And when I think about, when, to your question, when things were getting louder and attaching to other things like insecurity, like maybe depression, like anxiety, like pressures at work. When all those connectors would hit a mass, I'd pick up a bottle and go at it. And there was about 3 days of relief that would come out of it. Strangely, not just from getting hammered the night before, but those 2 days of being hungover, it would quiet things down for a little while. I don't know. Maybe it's just a me thing, but that was one of my experiences.
Yeah, massive reset button is what that was.
Yeah.
Super chat. It's like, what is your, I don't know if your mom ever said this, like if you hurt your toe, she's like, do you want me to smash your finger so you don't think about your toe?
Yeah, let me punch you in the gut. Now your foot doesn't hurt anymore. Now does it?
That's right.
Yeah,
Want to complain about anything else?
I think that's an interesting thing. I mean, I think you nailed it. I do think it is something that there's a chemical reset button. If you think about electric shock therapy, that's kind of what that's an electrical form of it. I wonder if that was a chemical form of it. I just say it out loud. I miss whiskey like a dead friend, but I am so glad I have sobriety. That
Yeah.
a much, much better person.
Yeah,
Because
man. And when I quit, I was so glad to have you because I think I told you I'm a little over a month now.
that's awesome.
Um, I wouldn't go the word like, I don't want to like dehumanize people that like, refer to as sobriety. I would say I had a problem. I wouldn't say it was, like, but it definitely, I read a couple of books and then, I recalled, you had gone through that process and I was glad that I knew you because it kind of gave me the wind I needed to say, you know what, just do it. Just get rid of it, get out of it if you can't handle it. And, yeah.
People act real strange. They don't, you know, normally people don't understand. They don't know how to react to the word alcoholic or the word sobriety, and things get real weird. I actually have a tendency of I'll order a club soda with a little bit of bitters in it, turns it orange, makes it look like a mixed drink. People don't ask questions.
That's a good point.
Yeah, they don't. Hey, what are you not drinking? Is it well, like what's going on? And so never really have to worry about it because it looks like I've got a cocktail and it's bitters and club soda. Um, but people get really weird around that topic. And one thing that I can sit next to someone having a drink, doesn't bother me. Maybe I can smell it and it brings back that's probably the hard one is, like smell a good strong drink or a nice glass of wine. But one thing I always say is like, if you don't have a problem, then you don't have a problem. Like it's not inherently evil. It's not, demon water. It's something wrong with me. And if you don't have a problem, then you don't have a problem. But, man, you talk about a great recipe for issues. Let's take imposter syndrome and pathological levels of self-doubt. Let's douse that with alcohol and see where it takes you. Good times.
I'll bring the lighter.
Well, congrats on the 1 month, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Hey, all's fair in love and war on the imposters. We'll talk about it all.
That's right. Bear it. Bear it all.
That's right, man. We have time for we want to do another one or
Yeah, let's wrap this up on this one, but let's get one more in.
cool. I thought it'd be good to maybe we've been zooming in on the individual a lot. Let's go to the team level. Let's leave somebody with maybe we got some managers listening or some people that some in some type of people development role. How does imposter syndrome after collaboration or creative output in a team setting? Or sorry, I read that wrong. Let me do that one more time. How does imposter syndrome affect collaboration or creative output in a team setting?
I don't know if this was in the intent of the question, but I'm going to take it somewhere with your permission. And I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but for managers, one of the things that I actually talk about is, this program, the Damage Advantage, is not just um, for people suffering with imposter syndrome. If you know someone, if you manage someone, if you mentor someone, if you love someone, if you're married to someone, whatever it might be, um, I think the 4 Rs can actually be pretty helpful to everybody. I think, research, if a manager identifies and says, look, I, what is it? I think the statistic is 5% of the workforce acknowledges imposter syndrome. 5% of corporations have some sort of acknowledgement of imposter syndrome and actually help managers um, with people that identify with imposter syndrome. So that's a small number. Like there's not enough people that are aware of it. And so the 4 Rs, the first one is research. Go try to understand it a little bit. It's not fake it till you make it. It's a lot more complicated. And depending on the person, it could be a lot more extreme and severe. There's a wide spectrum of it. But I think the 4 Rs would be helpful for a manager to understand. Even, I'm completely confident. I have no issues. That's great, but go research it. Try to understand it. Try to recognize it. Try to reflect back and think of when your teammate, was doing something that maybe you didn't understand. You didn't really recognize what was happening in the moment, but you can see it at some point and go, that's imposter syndrome. Let's talk about it. Let's open up about it. And then that remediate part as a coach, as a manager, a lot of that is just helping them go through those steps. And sometimes might just be as simple as a brag book to get them started on their path if you're managing someone through that process.
Wow. That's good stuff. For teams and individuals.
For teams and individuals. Well, I think that's a wrap on today's episode of The Imposters. Kyle, thank you for being an incredible interviewer and pulling some stuff out of me and bringing your A game today. For those of you that are listening, thanks for spending time with us as we peel back some pretty heavy layers of the onion that is imposter syndrome, and maybe, hopefully, shared a little bit about how you can potentially turn it into your advantage.
Absolutely. And the best thing about this is you're not alone. There's a community. And I know one of the biggest things that happens for me with this and other things, but especially imposter syndrome, is like knowing that there's this vernacular out there. Like like when you have a feeling for a long time and you don't know what it is, then you hear someone put a word to it, like imposter syndrome is like, that sounds really familiar. And then you figure out, then you find community. That's why you got to share this out. You're working with someone, you might be married to someone, you might be raising someone, you were raised by someone that has this. It's just a whole community out there. John's doing God's work on this thing. So please share this out. Invite people to this community. We're going to have a good time.
Kyle, I think you bring up a great point. We're probably going to start referencing other people that are doing work on this topic. There is a growing conversation, and I think bringing some of that to the table and just shining a light, whether you listen to us, whether you read something else, just so long as you're out there and you're doing your research, it's the first step of the 4 Rs. I think just a little teaser on one of our next ones. I'm gonna share with you a conversation that I had. That conversation was with Dr. Pauline Clance. the person, one of the ladies that in an article coined the term imposter syndrome. I'm going to share a little bit about a conversation that I had with her that I'm quite proud of. So, folks, follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn for more behind the scenes content and tidbits. And if we've earned it, share this podcast with that special family member or friend or person that you're managing or married to or love or care about. And if you think they should hear what we're discussing, send them on over. We'll be happy to have them.